Greetings, everyone. My name is Emily Louie, and on behalf of Campbell and Company, I'd like to welcome you to Cultivating Major Gift Prospects over Zoom. Thanks for joining us today. Moving to the next slide, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. First, please close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Next, we recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. And if you experience any visual issues, please send us a chat or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit that is good with your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. In that same follow-up email, you'll also receive a link to download today's slides along with a link to the recording. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on the right side of your computer screen. We'll also hold time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters today, Director of Communications Consulting, Andy Brommel, and Fundraising Senior Consultant, Cassie Carter.
All right, well, thanks, Emily, and hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope everyone's hanging in there and doing well. Hope you've all got your favorite flavor of LaCroix at hand. I'm Andy Brommel. I'm Director of Communications Consulting for Campbell and Company. On the screen, you can see what I look like at a wedding. So we have a communications team at Campbell and Company that really focuses on case development, fundraising communications, campaign branding, creative services, and all of these kind of communications capabilities that are really orbit around and are connected to fundraising. So that's kind of the perspective that I represent. Cassie's the fundraising expert. I'm a writer by background. So our team, we do a lot of webinars, presentations, and articles around all of those topics, around fundraising communications. And this year in particular, we're trying to really lean into that, recognizing that everyone is dealing with so many new challenges. So we want to share as much as we can. Today's topic comes from that. This is a new topic I've really been looking forward to, sharing some new ideas and co-presenting with Cassie.
Thanks, Andy. And I'm excited. Andy and I are going to bring you the A, B's, and C's of Zooming. Get it? Andy Brommel, Cassie Carter. Sorry about that. Had to get a little bit of humor in here somewhere. And to echo what Andy was just saying, a few months ago, I don't think either one of us would have dreamed that we'd be offering a webinar on this topic, and here we are. Both of us have been building rapid and deep experience in using Zoom to engage donors and clients and everybody, and I know that some of us are zoomed out. So we're going to try to make this as fun and entertaining as possible. As Andy mentioned, I'm Cassie Carter. I'm a senior consultant with Campbell and Company. I have been with the firm now. I'm going into my 5th year, which is amazing and wonderful. Prior to coming to Campbell, I worked in the nonprofit sector for 30 plus years, both in really large institutions such as museums and higher ed, but also in small nonprofits that were scrappy and really earning every dollar. And so I've been in your shoes and excited to be sharing with you today some of the things that we've been learning about how best practices are evolving around donor engagement and major gift engagement. So with that, I'll let Andy kick us off.
Sure. So let's dig in. We're here today because as we've gone through this year together with our clients, we've really seen, in addition to how everything has affected our lives, our families, our communities, all the events of this year have also really disrupted everyone's fundraising plans, campaigns, strategies, and especially around major gift cultivation. Some of that is just the sheer disruption of everything, all the things you've had to rush and pay attention to that push your major gift work down the list. Some of that is this sense of uncertainty that organizations are feeling around whether it's okay to ask or even to ask for attention or ask for time in the middle of a pandemic and in this rising dialogue around racial justice. And some of the disruption is just kind of feeling wrong-footed and not knowing exactly how to cultivate prospects under these circumstances, when all your habits, all your go-to tactics and tricks are all built around in-person contact. So for all these reasons, we've seen so many organizations just really get thrown off their game with major giving this year. And of course, that all makes sense. We're, in our own way dealing with the same. But at the same time, the show must go on because for a few reasons. It's first of all, it's not relationship-based fundraising if you just ghost people for a year, or at least I hope you are all in better relationships than that. We can't just let our most valuable relationships go totally cold. Show must go on because donors are available. They're willing to connect. People have a lot of stuff going on. We're actually hearing from some of our clients that some of their donors are actually easier to get in touch with this year because they're not traveling, they're not on planes all the time, or who knows, maybe they actually just want the chance to talk about something good and focus on something good for a change. People are still making major gifts. I don't know that we have really authoritative numbers on this just yet, but we've certainly seen enough from the organizations that we work with. People are giving to the causes that are important to them. Solicitations can still move forward. The stock market has now totally recovered, which is, I guess, encouraging, maybe a little bit psychotic. I don't know who understands these things. Remote cultivation does work over video conferencing. We've seen plenty of track record at this point. It takes a different kind of planning, but it's viable and you can make it work for you, and that's what we're going to talk about. This last point is interesting. Some of our clients are actually telling us that they feel like it kind of levels the playing field for organizations. Like they can get meetings with people. There's less to worry about with like finding the right place or the right setting or time or squeezing it into an event. Maybe some of the power relationships are sort of flattened out by just having everybody in their own little box on video. This has been interesting to hear, this sense that we have this sense that we're all settling for like second best cultivation, but maybe that's not true. Maybe actually the chance to take away some of the distractions, call a meeting with someone to talk about something you all care about, and just go through it in a way that's really structured and substantive. Maybe it's not second best. Maybe we can have really high quality cultivation under these circumstances. Let's just get a bit of context here. Let's see how folks on the line are using these technologies today. So we're going to put up a poll. This is kind of a check all that apply. Are you not using it at all for donor engagement outside of whatever you're doing with your board or volunteer groups? Have you done large group events? Have you done small group donor engagements? Have you done individual cultivation? So let's put up the poll and just see where folks are at. I really don't have a strong prior for what we're gonna find here, actually.
Interesting. 70% of you.
The poll? Okay, I can't see it because I'm sharing my screen. Can you?
Yep, I sure can. So 70% have conducted individual donor cultivation by video already. That's fabulous. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. 61% have conducted small group donor engagements already. 60% of you have done large events. Go team, that's brave. And only 15% have not used video for donor engagement. So we have an experienced crew here to share today.
Oh, that's great. Cool. Okay. So then, part B of the question, how's it been going? On the scale of let's not do this again, it's more trouble than it's worth. It was fine. Maybe it's about this, you know, felt okay, or maybe it was better than I thought it would be, or this is great. I never want to go back, or I want to keep this in my repertoire even beyond its pandemic necessity. Let's see how people feel overall.
And for a little bit of context for this data, we've got more than 300 of us joined today, and we have attendees from across the United States and into Canada. We have really small institutions, tiny little places out in the middle of Montana, all the way to giant universities and museums. So we've got the gamut. And the data shows us bad, let's not do it again, only 1%. Interesting. Disappointing, more trouble than it's worth, 10%. Okay, about the same as in person, 26%. Good, better than I thought it would be, 58%. And great, I never want to go back, 5%. So we're on this precipice. Yeah, this is not so bad, but I don't want my life to be dominated by this forever.
That's interesting. Cassie, does that surprise you? How would you square that with like your clients' experiences or some of the challenges that you've seen?
You know, it's about what I'm hearing and seeing. I think people are feeling that it's better than they thought it would be. You know, there were a lot of rules, and I'll talk about this in a moment when we do some case studies, but there were a lot of rules we thought we had to follow around in-person engagement, in-person cultivation. And I think we're finding that, as you were saying, in some cases, you can actually do some of this better and more effectively. Donors have been more available. It's easier sometimes to get somebody on a video call than it has been to meet them in person. So we are seeing some success. It's been awkward. There's been times that it hasn't worked well, but I think it's been better than I thought it'd be for sure. I never want to go back. I don't know, it depends on how much travel you had to do beforehand. Some of us are feeling like, oh, okay, I can do this forever. But I think we're missing and hungry for some of the in-person connections. So I get the response.
That makes sense. That's about how I feel about working from home endlessly. You know, I haven't been into the office since like early March, and I don't know if I'm going to be back there until next summer. I hope I didn't like leave any food on my desk, right?
Yeah, knock on wood, right?
I've got a pair of dress shoes there that I hope I don't need because I really don't want to go back in. All right, so let's dig in. The heart of this session is going to be looking at some case studies, looking at in particular 3 different kinds of approaches that Cassie's going to walk us through. I'm going to drop off video for a minute so I don't have to sit here and try to figure out how to make like neutral face the whole time. So we're going to be in Cassie's hands for the next while here.
All right, thank you, Andy. Appreciate it, and I'm excited to jump in and share some of the examples of what I've been seeing and learning. You know, being a consultant right now, we're in a privileged position because we get to see what's going on across the United States, a bit internationally, even though less of that right now. And we're getting to see all kinds of organizations as they're jumping in. So a couple of things I want to share as we walk through these 3 case studies. One is at the heart of good fundraising, and Andy mentioned this at the beginning, is really authentic relationship building. And so if you're not connecting with your donors, and I know a lot of organizations were hesitant, should I be reaching out to donors right now with everything that's going on? If you're not connecting with your donors, somebody else is. And somebody else is making the case of the relevance of their organization. And so I know we're all drowning under texts and emails right now around political campaigns. I'm hoping, I'm going to knock on wood, that that's going to be over soon. People do want to hear from the organizations that are important to them, and you do need to be reaching out and connecting. The one thing to think about is this sort of 80-20 guideline. 80% of your outreach should be around the content of what you do as an organization, connected to your mission, connected to your relevance, and about 20% of your outreach should really be focused on asking for support. One of the wonderful things that we're learning right now is you can break some rules from best practices. So for example, you can ask for core operating support right now from your donors, and people are supporting that. Whereas 8 months ago, asking for core operating support made it sound like you didn't know how to run your organization. Even foundations are supporting core operating. And I'm hoping that that's one of those things that we never go back to, about not being able to demonstrate the importance and the value of the infrastructure for our nonprofit. Our nonprofits would not be here, would not be filling these really important gaps in what our society doesn't provide if we didn't have this infrastructure of the nonprofits. When you think about your donor engagement, very important that you've got a roadmap. You want to have a roadmap for where you're going with the engagement. You want to have a roadmap for what you're hoping to accomplish from the group of donors specifically, and from your donor engagement plan overall. So best practices tell us that we need to have strong relationships. We need to really be watching the readiness of our donors to give and to participate, and that we need to have projects that are donor-centered. I'm going to tweak that a tiny bit. We do need to be connecting with them. The readiness piece is incredibly important. When you're having donor conversations, you need to be very in tune to where your donors are right now personally. What's going on in their lives that's impacting their ability to engage with you, and how are they feeling right now? But in terms of donor-centered, you do have an opportunity right now to really be thinking about making a case for what's important to your organization, and less about a program that a donor might be interested in. Donors are really interested right now in making an impact. They want to know that you know what that impact is going to take. So one very effective tool that I've seen is the small group salon, for lack of a better word than salon. And this is 4 to 8 prospects. These are people who've already been identified. They've already been qualified as major gift prospects. So this is reserved for people who you know have capacity, but they need more engagement before they're really ready to make a significant gift to your organization. You want to create a program that is short, efficient, high energy, 8 to 10 slides with visuals, not a lot of text. Andy's going to show you some examples of this in a little bit so you can get a sense of the color. Bulk of the time dedicated to discussion. This is the kind of structure where you invite somebody who might be a host, somebody who's already a donor in your organization, and then they're going to either invite friends or welcome or do the introductions, and then you'll have a staff person or a board member who's doing the presentation. I've seen this work really well with several different types of organizations. One organization represents wildlife sanctuaries, and they have donors that live all over the United States. It's really challenging for them to be connecting to those donors. And what they've done has been hosting these sort of 15-minute of content salons with their top donors that are scattered, doing introductions between these donors, and then doing the follow-up afterwards. And one thing that they have found is that the donors who meet via video are really enjoying getting to meet each other, and many times they're continuing these conversations outside and afterwards, and several of them have gotten together to propose support for the projects in a collaborative and doing challenges. Another example, I'm working with an aquarium that has done a really wonderful job of bringing together, they're deep into their campaign, they're bringing together designers who have been working on their new facility and giving some of their top prospects the opportunity to meet the designers face to face and ask questions about what the aquarium is going to look like. It's been a very powerful cultivation tool, a very powerful way of bringing together people who either already know each other or want to know each other. And then another example I've seen for the small group salons that's been really impactful is with independent schools, where you've got parents who represent a certain cohort, and they have been bringing together other parents in that cohort, so a grade level or a sports affiliation, and talking about their campaign. In all cases, the key to success on this is the follow-up after the salon, where you reach out to each person individually and chat with them about what questions do they have, what did they learn, get a sense of their readiness so you know whether or not you can advance them to the next level. All right, let's talk about bigger groups. Large group events. So about 70 or 60% of you have done already these large group events. I've been a part of some that worked really well, and I've been a part of some that were sort of awkward and messy, especially some of the early ones. A couple of ones that have been really, really great, and this was an early event when the pandemic was first started, was a large museum that I've worked with offered to go into sort of the home visually of one of their top curators. And the curator cooked for the audience, and this was top donors and prospects. And he cooked empanadas, and he shared wines that were paired with the empanadas, and recipes were sent out in advance. And then while he was cooking, he talked about things like how he got excited about science and how he got excited and became a curator. It was a really neat opportunity to see inside somebody's life and home, and the donors loved it. I've also participated recently with a wine tasting for a community group that I'm working with right now. Everybody got sent little bottles of wine, and they got sent little packets of spices that would be what you would cook food with to pair with the wine. Most of the event was run by a vintner, and she talked about how the wine was made, how food was prepared. It was really fun. There was a lot of opportunity for conversation. It was a really great event, and they had so many people who made gifts above and beyond what they normally make after participating in the event, and a lot of people who didn't want to or couldn't attend it made gifts. So they saw their annual fund actually go up significantly by exploring this event. Another organization that I'm working with, an independent school, used the large group event as a way to actually kick off the major gift phase of their campaign. They were just getting ready to dip into major gifts before the pandemic started. They weren't quite ready to move into that, but they decided that given the pandemic, they would launch their major gift phase. They invited about 100 people. They had 75 people show up. They did really focused about 30 minutes of content. They had multiple voices. It was parents, it was faculty, it was donors. They each spoke for about 2 minutes. Their talking points were not tightly scripted, but were planned. So everybody was using their own voice, but they were staying on point. Everybody stayed exactly on time. And then they did breakout groups because they had such a large group of 75 people. They did breakout groups. In the breakout groups, everybody had a chance to ask deeper questions about the campaign priorities and how to participate. It was a really well done event. It had this balance between being very well designed and really beautiful graphics. They showed a lot of images of the campus and where the campus is going. Lots of people got to see and hear from people that they don't normally get to see and hear from. And then they did follow-up, and they've been continuing to do follow-up throughout the summer. And they're starting now to move into solicitation with this group, and they're starting to see some major gifts coming in. So what's exciting about that particular style of a campaign kickoff is you can reach out to a large group of people. You can bring them all sort of up to the same level of information and engagement, and then you can move into the small group salons for those who want more information. It really jump-started their campaign in a way that they probably could not have done as effectively in person, because all these parents are really busy, tough to get them to show up to one place at the same time. So here you had everybody for an hour and a half, and the actual presentation was only 30 minutes. So it was a terrific event. So I've seen some really wonderful events. And then the last sort of style, and some of you said that you're already using this, which I think 70% said you're already using this, which is really wonderful, is the individual prospect call. And so this is the tough one for a lot of organizations to wrap their brain around, because we've been taught that these kind of high-level top prospect engagements need to be face-to-face. This is where you're bringing together a board, you're bringing together leadership from the institution and some of your top donors, and you're providing information. You are, in many cases, actually doing a solicitation or high-level stewardship, and now you suddenly can't do that face-to-face. Andy and I have a colleague who worked with an organization where they were so loath to not do it face-to-face that they tried to do the solicitation in person. The donor was uncomfortable with that concept, but didn't want to say no. And so they ended up standing at the foot of her driveway, wearing their masks and yelling their solicitation up to her for their campaign. And it was a disaster. It was a nightmare. She was uncomfortable. She was embarrassed. They were not at their best. And they realized really quickly that face-to-face on video was so much more impactful. I also was a part of some early, this was sort of back at the beginning of the pandemic, some early board meetings and early group donor meetings that were in person where people were wearing masks sitting around a board table. And that was uncomfortable. You couldn't see people's faces. You couldn't read expressions. Everybody was looking at their watch, wondering at what point have they overstayed the sort of share the air concept. So it was so much better than to move into the Zoom idea. The key now with the individual prospects is that you can actually have a 3-to-1 or a 2-to-3 ratio where you've got a couple or one person, and then you've got 2 or 3 people from the institution, somebody who's a content expert, somebody who's representing leadership, somebody who's representing development, and have a really nice conversation. Less than 10 minutes of content, and then the rest of it is conversation. And you want to make sure that you've got clear expectations set at the beginning as to what this conversation is going to be. If it's a handoff between a parent at an independent school and leadership for the solicitation, you want the parent to have teed up the couple that you're going to be speaking to in advance in a really positive way of saying, I'd love for you to have an opportunity to talk to the head of school and talk to the director of the facility. And so can I set up a call? In other cases, you might be actually doing a high-level solicitation. I saw a really terrific solicitation that was done with an aquarium where it was their campaign chair, it was the head of the aquarium, and it was their vice president having a conversation with a top donor. The top donor knew that they were moving into solicitation with this, and they had a really good, deep conversation about where the organization was for a campaign, where the organization was in terms of general response to COVID. You know, what was it they needed? How would a gift be structured? What would be the impact of the gift? And it was a very productive call. The key is that you want to make sure that there's clarity around the purpose, there's clarity around what you're asking for, clarity around next steps, and that you've got the right people at the right meeting. Again, that peer-to-peer is really important, even if it's not face-to-face. So what have we learned in terms of our best practices with this? Because we're learning some things sort of in a so far kind of way. One is keep your donor engagement simple and visual. So decks that have a lot of images and less text, not like the slide I'm showing you right now, are really important. Multiple voices on behalf of the organization is also really important. And so what this means is that people speak for a short period of time, sort of unlike what I'm doing right now at this moment, and that they speak from their perspective, they speak from their lens, they speak from their passion, and it makes a more interesting conversation and it allows multiple perspectives. Get your timing down. Keep your Zoom meetings short. Plan for 15 minutes content. I know some of the organizations we're working with, they put together 2 hours worth of content and then they have to keep trimming it. And when they've done some ones where it was 45 minutes of content, they were feeling like I couldn't possibly trim anything more out of here. They realize that it's just too long. You do get zoomed out. Keep it short. It's going to be better. You can always do follow-up. You always want a reason to do follow-up. Keeping it short gives you that opportunity to do follow-up. Make sure you've got an opportunity for conversation. You really want to hear from the people that you're meeting with. You don't want it to be a one-sided conversation. If you've got a big group, experiment with breakouts and use breakouts in ways where people have an opportunity to ask those questions. Again, let people speak from their perspective and in their own voices, but know that you've got a focused message for the purpose of that specific Zoom meeting that you're doing. Don't just do a one-off. Don't do a single salon and put a ton of work into it and then walk away from it. Get a schedule, get into a rhythm. The more you do these, the easier they get, the better your materials get, the more effective you are at communicating via video. Use volunteers. You want other people to speak for your organization. You want your volunteers, your board members, your program participants, your campaign leadership. If you're not in a campaign and you're just engaging donors, somebody who perhaps uses your program, you want to have these multiple voices there. One thing I want to go back to just for a moment that Andy talked about in terms of leveling the playing field. I've been on some amazing Zooms where one organization I work with has a lot of celebrities on their board. And normally the celebrities are quiet in board meetings. And in fact, often they don't even attend. But now that it's Zoom and a lot of them are not off filming or doing the different things they do, they're participating. And the dominant voices, which used to be like the producers and the directors, are now being replaced by some of the celebrities who are speaking out because they're just equals. They're a little box on the screen with everybody else. It's really wonderful. Another organization that I'm working with has it's a disability center, and several of their staff and their board have commented that when they're in Zoom, it's a more equal opportunity for everybody to be participating. And I think that that is a really wonderful silver lining to what's going on. And then, can you ask for a gift over Zoom? Yes, you can. I've seen a lot of organizations closing a lot of really wonderful major gifts right now, and building their annual fund, upgrading their donors to from annual to mid-level. So people are still giving. They're giving to organizations that are important to them, and they're giving to organizations that have demonstrated their relevance and are really clear about what they need right now. So there's some good best practices that we're learning and a few rules that we get to break, like you get to ask for core operating. All right, I'm going to hand it to Andy to take us through some fun stuff that has pictures.
So I love seeing these case studies, the different ways you can use this. You realize it's just a format. You can use it for many different applications, but what a lot of them have in common really is that they really benefit from having a great case presentation deck that you've put some time into and you feel really comfortable with. Now, if you've been on any of our webinars over the years, you know that we've been kind of preaching the gospel of case decks for years. Most of our client-side casework, we actually build the case through a deck format rather than a traditional narrative case statement. So we're kind of true believers around having a good case deck anyway, but it's gone from being, I think, a good idea to being pretty essential if you want to keep engaging your top prospects over the next year. So let's talk a little bit about what makes the perfect deck for video cultivation, and we'll show you a good example as well. Just 4 basic guidelines here. The first is to keep it short. Long presentations over a video conferencing setup are kind of a bummer. You're going to want to lean toward discussion and conversations. You basically just want a deck that helps get discussion going. It does not have to have every little detail in it. You're probably looking for a deck that allows you to cover the core content of your case in 10 minutes or less, especially if you can have the option to cut it down to about 5 minutes, if you can pull out just the most important slides. So for most organizations, that's going to mean 15 slides or fewer, including the cover, the section title slides, the final Q&A slides. And again, to Cassie's point, if you want to hit that timing, you do have to practice with a timer. Second guideline, build all the slides around really clear core messages. It's tough to give people really dense, thick slides over video conference when they don't have you there in the room to kind of anchor the content. So every slide should have one really clear message that jumps out at you, and everything else, photography, supporting copy or bullet points, other graphics, all the other stuff should be clearly supporting that core message. So if you just go through and you think like, I get one big idea per slide and I want, 5 or 10 or 15 slides, think about it in that kind of framing. And of course, if your case is complicated or has a lot of details, and you still want to have those at hand, just put them down in the notes section and know that you can still reference them. If questions come up, you can answer from those notes, but try to keep the on-slide content really focused. As Cassie mentioned, make it visually dynamic. It's just, again, it's so much harder to hold someone's attention over video. So it helps to give them something more engaging to look at. If at all possible, it's beneficial to work with a professional designer, but or an in-house designer. But if that's not feasible for you, you could just do a simple, clean, well-balanced layout using your basic branded template. I mean, that's basically what we've done here. Not really professionally designed. We just tried to make good use of the Campbell and Company template and make the big ideas look big. And finally, use normal person language. We always, again, this is one of those things we're always talking about, but you just have to kind of remember how much is working against you here. You're not physically present. You don't have your physical presence and energy in the room to hold people's attention. The person on the other line, they can zone out without you knowing. They can be checking their emails, all those little like social conventions that would keep them paying attention if you were a person in the room. They kind of are free from those. And even just technologically, you're in a little video box, the dynamic range of your voice is being compressed through the audio. So there are all these things that are like pulling you further away from your audience. So then if you're also, talking like a robot with a bunch of scripted language that would only work in a grant proposal, if you're also doing that, then you pretty much lost the connection. So give yourself normal human language that feels good to say out loud, that sounds like yourself when you say it, and that makes your point as clearly as possible. So let's walk through a deck that at least I think does these things. I picked this one as an example because it's a little bit older. It's a campaign that ended a few years ago. It was a very simple campaign to build a new building. It's from one of my just absolute favorite organizations that we've had the chance to work with, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics. It was, again, a very simple campaign to build a new building for their headquarters. This was a few years ago, so I don't think they actually did video cultivation, but I pulled this one because I thought it would be essentially a perfect deck for these purposes, and it puts these practices or these guidelines into practice. I'm not going to kind of perform the whole thing here. I'm just going to kind of flip through it. So a lot of the slides have this kind of a format where there's one key message that jumps out at you. And where we have supporting content, it's pretty light. It's pretty clearly subordinated to the key message. It's not an overwhelming level of detail. Even on slides like this, where essentially this is setting up all these different examples of stories and parts of AAP's track record, things that they were out in the lead on. So you can go through this slide at a very high level, but if you want to jump off and talk about the specifics of any of these or tell the story of any of these, you can. But the slide is giving you the option to do the short version, just cruise right through it, or to come back to it if somebody has a question, or if you know that one of these is particularly of interest to them. So you want slides that give you the option to go short, medium, or long, and that don't commit you to talking too much. Again, simple, simple factoids that support a really clear message. This is, again, using all pretty simple, straightforward language. When you introduce a big idea, make it feel big, use the whole screen, illustrate show visually what you can. So this is about the location, so you can visualize that. When you get into often the back half of the presentation is where you have more of the supporting detail or more of the like second level details in support of the plan. So you just want to make these slides very easy to skim through so that you don't have to deliver all these factoids. Again, a closing thought, like make the big ideas big, and use photography to help bring some of these examples to life. Again, on a slide like this, every one of these examples of their leadership in a crisis, there's a whole story for each of these, but you don't want to try to put the whole story on the slide because then you have to tell it. Leave them there as little Easter eggs or little things that somebody can ask about, and then you can expand, and then you're having a conversation. So again, this is a very simple deck. You could cruise through this pretty quickly. You can get through this deck in 10 minutes and then spend the rest of the call just talking about it, seeing what questions people have. This one is professionally designed, but this basic style of content you can do on your own using just a basic branded template. Make the big ideas big, keep the content under control, use photos if you have them. You know, close on a really clear idea. So this is the, I'm just going to walk through this again from start to finish. I think this is like 14 slides from beginning to end, and it's using those same 4 principles: keep it short, clear core messages, visually dynamic, normal person language. And so I think this would work very nicely for video cultivation. As it happens, all of these guidelines are things that they're pretty good best practices for in-person presentations as well, but it's just a lot more important when you're doing it over video. Because when you're in person, you have so much more going for you. You have your in-person energy. Honestly, like a really good presenter in the room can totally succeed, even if their deck is, you know, kind of mediocre. But over video, you don't really have that working. You have some more things working against you. So this is our sample, and this is actually all the content that we have planned for today. We're going to take the rest of the time for Q&A. Before we do that, I just want to put this on your radars. If you found this at all helpful, we would love if you would check out all of the other fundraising communications resources that our team will be sharing. Again, we have a whole program of thought leadership resources that we share. We do an annual cycle of webinars that we're just actually getting started in the next few weeks. This is kind of our core curriculum. So defining your case for support, donor messaging and writing. In the winter, we'll be doing volunteer message coaching and training, communications materials for major gift cultivation, where we look at decks, print materials, video, how to spend a budget on different communications materials. In the summer, we'll be doing campaign case development communications. So there's this whole cycle of webinars we'd love if you checked out. And then also, we actually just started this article series this year, back in April when COVID was shutting everything down. We were all feeling bad. We felt like we wanted to start sharing more, try to write down everything we know and give it away. So we've been doing weekly articles on case development, donor messaging, communication strategy, lots of interesting topics. So just one request for everyone today. I would love if you found this valuable to go to this link, sign up to receive those articles every week, and that way you can make sure not to miss any of the good stuff that the team is putting out. All the different voices on our team are pitching into this. So that leaves time for questions. Emily, do we have some questions to dig into?
We do. Before we get into those, I just want to share a comment that was submitted by an audience member who said, "We have found that the level of intimacy is increased when we are on a Zoom. Donors get emotional when talking about their why, more emotional than they would have been if we had been sitting at a restaurant having a meal together."
Interesting. Huh.
You know,
You attribute that to Cassie?
Yeah, I understand that, and I've seen that, and I think that some of that is just the layer of emotion that is all over everybody right now about everything that's going on in the world. People are a little more sort of on the edge I think than they normally are, and then they would be in public. I mean, I hate to say this, but I I am a part of a conversation probably weekly where somebody cries or really unravels right now. And I think it's this layer of exhaustion, it's a layer of concern, it's a layer of fear, it's a layer of worry about the organizations that are important to us. I mean, you really worry that those organizations are going to go away. We miss them. I've heard from a lot of people how much they miss arts and culture organizations, for example, right now. And for the universities, how much the students miss being on campus and how much the faculty and the staff miss having the students. So I think that there's a lot of really heavy emotion right now in it. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a time when all of our emotions are closer to the surface, and there's a privacy to video conferencing that, I mean, certainly compared to being in a restaurant, or some more like semi-public space, or you're meeting in your office or something where you kind of have all your sort of behavioral conditioning of like office behavior around you. There's something intimate about just being in people's homes. I've sort of loved seeing everyone's backgrounds and just kind of feeling like we're all like a little bit more real humans this year. I hope we don't have to give that up when we get back to more normal operations.
Me too.
Great, thanks so much for sharing with us. Our first question is, how have donors reacted to gifts being sent to them in advance of virtual programming? Are any objecting to money being spent that way?
That's a really good question. And I've had several organizations think that through and talk that through. Because there's this tug of wanting everybody to be having a similar experience together, and sharing something, whether it's a coffee or a glass of wine or something else that you have, versus the idea that you're shipping little packages to everybody. With the case of the Disability Center that sent the wine out, it was actually the vintner that absorbed the cost of that, and that was part of their support of that particular nonprofit. They chose to make that support. I have seen other organizations where they decided to send little gift packages as part of stewardship. So it's a balance. If you've got in your budget already the idea that you're going to be spending money on stewardship, you're probably spending a lot less money on your events, like your galas and things like that. And even though you need every penny for your core operating, I think you can make a case for the concept of building community, but you don't want to go overboard with it. You want to definitely be paying attention to where you want to be really paying attention to where people are at this moment in time and where their priorities are. It's a great question.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, how do you handle donors who cannot use Zoom because of company policy or are just not comfortable?
Phone calls. Old-fashioned phone calls, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like we keep. I feel like there's been waves of enthusiasm and backlash and coming back around with video conferencing, where we're all excited because we can do this, we can stay in touch with people, and then we have like Zoom backlash because we have the Zoom fatigue, and there's something kind of sometimes exhausting about being on video all day. And I've definitely just in my week-to-week work life felt like I can only do so many of these, and I need to, for communications where I already know the person or we're just trying to like get down to work, I have been coming around to really appreciating good old-fashioned phone calls where I have no consciousness of my posture or whatever. Like I'm not trying to like move little tiles around a screen. I'm just like, I have a person's voice in my ears, and you feel like you're like mind melding with them in a way that's sometimes almost like more intimate. So I would miss being able to show slides and present content that way, although obviously you can send all that in advance. Anything that's optimized for on-screen sharing will probably boil down to a nice PDF that you can send in advance and just kind of walk through. So yeah, there's probably workarounds. Cassie, I'd love to hear any of your experiences around that.
And Andy, just like what you're sharing, I have some mixed emotions about it. One wonderful thing, so I've been working remote in California from the main Campbell offices of Chicago and Seattle for almost 5 years now. And so I was sort of used to that. And now I get to see colleagues, I get to see people, the organizations I'm working with more frequently because we're on Zoom together. And I really appreciated that opportunity. And so I'm spending more time with people in that respect. But there is a lot of Zoom fatigue. It is exhausting. I do have some clients, and I also have some organizations where some of the donors do not want to Zoom, and I would not push people if they're not comfortable doing that. So again, the voice, the phone call is a great thing. One thing that I would suggest is some organizations that I work with have been trying to move back to in-person meetings, like in-person board meetings, in-person salons. And I think that that's really challenging right now because you've got different layers of comfort of being in person. And so you don't want to have a donor feel like you're judging them if they don't want to meet in person. And so sometimes taking that off the table for this moment in time might be helpful because people don't necessarily want to say that they're uncomfortable doing something that they were comfortable doing 8-9 months ago. That's a great question. And it's something that I think as we get more and more used to Zoom and Zoom gets better, we'll have less of that Zoom fatigue. I was at a workshop the other day where we were getting ready to do a presentation, and the woman leading the panel had never used Zoom before, and I had to be really careful that I didn't have my facial expression like, "What? You've never used Zoom before? Where have you been for the last 8 months?" And she hadn't used it before, so we had to do this training and coaching with her on it. So we're all at different places, definitely. Emily, did you have other questions for us?
We do. Cassie, earlier you mentioned keeping individual prospect calls to 10 minutes or less. Would you say that applies for a solicitation meeting as well as cultivation?
That's a really good question. So I would keep the content to 5 or 10 minutes if possible, and keep the rest of it for conversation and allow enough space for that conversation to happen. You don't want to rush it. So if you know, for example, if you know you're going to be asking somebody for a significant gift for a campaign, and they're ready and you're ready to probably have that conversation, I would block an hour on everybody's calendars. So that way, then you've got the space there. You probably won't need it, you probably won't use it, but I'd give yourself the time. But I would keep the part where you're talking to 10 minutes and let them have opportunity to really have that conversation. And then to Andy's point, what you're presenting, to have it be as visual as possible and as simple and as clean as possible. I know it's really hard to keep that content short, because you want to tell them everything, but you really need to start with one thing and then see how they're reacting to it and what perspective or lens they have. Andy, do you want to add?
No, I think that was perfect. Yeah, just put enough out there, scatter enough, like little ideas out there to get the conversation started. If they ask you for more information, if they ask you questions, it doesn't mean that you've been exposed, like you didn't have enough detail in there. That's just good. That's like the sign that it's working. You're having a conversation. That's what you want.
Yeah. It's the same thing when you're planning that concept of elevator speech, where you want to be able to introduce your organization and why somebody would be interested in it. Less is more. Keep it really short, offer one enthusiastic point, and then wait for the other person to respond.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, I work for a liberal arts college who struggled getting in-person visits prior to the pandemic. Since March, we have continued to struggle with getting face-to-face via Zoom. There's a lot of discovery work that needs to take place. We don't have a heavy number of engaged donors, so most of these are cold. Is there any secret sauce to getting people to agree to engage with us in this way?
Oh, you are not alone.
Yeah. So, Cassie, I want to hear your take on this, but to me, this sounds like a qualification issue. And this is just one of those things, like every organization seems to struggle on some level with the qualification step of the major gift like relationship cycle, where you're identifying people who might be prospects, you're qualifying and figuring out who is really viable for major gift cultivation, and then you're off to the races with cultivation, solicitation, stewardship. But that second stage really does, so few organizations that really are experts at it, and it can really hang you up. So by way of answering this question, I just want to, maybe we should send this out after. Our fundraising team just put together a whole report of basically just collecting all the best practices around qualification that we've seen in the last few years. I think it's one of the most useful things that the firm has put out in a while. So that I would just kind of answer by pointing toward that. Cassie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a terrific resource that you're referencing, Andy. It's a really wonderful resource. And the one thing that I would suggest is if you don't have somebody who's qualified and already engaged, I would try that a really low bar way of getting them engaged, which is one of those big group content focused events that they get invited to in a special way. So that way then it's not a one-to-one. They're not probably ready for that. They're dodging you because they're not ready for that. But if they come to a group thing where you've got 50 people and they get to be an insider in that's 50 people, just for the fact that they've showed up, they've qualified themselves, and then you can do that follow up, and they're probably more willing to engage. But it's the toughest thing. That qualification is brutal, and I would echo what Andy just said, especially about the qualification guidelines and report.
Great, thank you. Our final question is, have you had any specific successes in the performing arts? I think many organizations like ours are holding on, spending from a reserve if they have it, but can't really carry out their core programming.
I'll jump in because performing arts is tough. It's brutal and it's heartbreaking, and you're not alone on that. So the areas that we've seen success has been where, and I'll use content providers for lack of a better term, but your performers, the people that people come to see, if you engage them in ways to engage your donors, having them participate in a 50-person content-rich event, having them join in a small group salon, and asking for core operating support so that you can reopen when the time is right in a vibrant fashion. I've seen some organizations have very specific and good success in doing that strategy. The other piece is whatever you can provide that is content that's going out to your stakeholder group right now is really helpful. And whatever you can do that demonstrates that you're nimble and adapting to building that community of your stakeholders is very helpful. A lot of times asking people to just maintain their annual fund right now can be impactful, and I'm seeing more and more. I'm seeing some performing arts organizations have actually increased their annual fund giving because people know how important it is. So it's really a matter of showing that you're relevant, that you need to be there when they come back, when everybody comes back, that you understand what it is you need to function, and then connecting people in special ways so they get to be behind the scenes. Like what Andy was saying before, you get to see inside somebody's house, and that's really super cool. And people love that. It's a great opportunity. Andy.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. My personal client mix over the last year has been focused in other areas, just in the in the random mix of clients that we serve. So I don't have much to add there, but it's a good question. I've been wondering and hoping for our performing arts friends without their means of connecting with folks.
Super hard hit during this time. And the ones that are finding success are the ones that are still finding ways to do outreach and stay connected. It's tough.
Great, thank you so much. And with that, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Within the next 24 hours, you'll be receiving a follow-up email from GoToWebinar with a link to the recording and slides. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to email our presenters with any questions you have. Andy, if you move to the next slide, we have both of our presenters' emails up there. And thank you so much. We hope you have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone.